In this video, we're going to be talking about basic tonal adjustments in Camera Raw. Basic tonal adjustments are in the first section in the tab that's labeled Basic. We're talking about exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. Exposure is really the overall luminance of the image, so the emphasis is really on the white points of the picture. So you're really trying to establish where the whitest point in your image is using the exposure setting. So you can start to click and drag in one direction or the other. When you hold down the Option or Alt key, you're able to then see where the clipping is occurring in your actual image. Clipping, once again, is a loss of detail in the area of the picture, and in this case we're talking about the white areas. So as we start to drag over towards this area, release the Option key, this is pretty much where we can establish the whitest areas in our picture in creating the detail where we're at. When we're talking about contrast, contrast is basically as what it talks about. It increases the bright areas and of the highlights and darkening the shadowed areas in the darker values. Highlights and shadows really work with a broad range of the light values and the dark areas, while the white areas and the black areas work with more of a narrow range, or the brightest or the darkest areas in the image. So if we start with the blacks, we can then start to move in one area to establish where our darkest value is. Once again, we can hold the Option key just to make sure that we're not creating any clipping. So we're going to lighten up the darkest area right where we use any type of clipping at this stage. So we've established the darkest point. We can then go to the shadow areas to then work on the details of where we want to create those dark values to be. So we're going to kind of increase the lighter values of that shadow. Once again, we can hold on to the Option key to see if there's any clipping involved with that. We can also look at our histogram, looking at the right hand side, making sure that none of that area here is clipped or loss of detail. Same thing with the white. We want to then increase the white, hold the Option key, and start to deliver where the areas of the loss of detail is just about no longer there. So we'll let go of the key, and right about in the center area there, about -4, we can then increase or decrease in that direction there. So we established our lightest area in the picture along with the exposure, and then with the highlights we can then bring in some of that detail back into those areas of the light values. We can then look into the preview menu to look at the before and after. So we've established using the exposure the brightest areas, the contrast. We can then use this to either bump those values of light and dark, or make more of a mid-range between the two in Camera Raw.